Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday morning. We'll begin shortly.
Good morning.
So before we begin, it would be great if you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box, and we'll be taking questions as we go through the webinar. We're looking forward to answering any query, anything that you have. Oh, it's interesting to see some familiar names. Hi, Prathamesh. It's an unusual name, so it stands out. All right, we're almost at the mark. Just give us a minute or two and we'll begin. Morning, Himanshu. So we have a very, very interesting topic today. How to be the candidate everyone wants to hire. Pramath, these are really, I hope you're going to give us some really interesting secrets on how you hire and what is it that stands out. But other than that, what can people do to become a sought after candidate where it's not always dependent on what degree you hold or what sort of, prior education you have. I think most of our candidates or most of the people on the webinar are looking for those insights that we will come with your experience in years of working across different industries. All right.
Sure.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Seema Chowdhury. I head the Harappa School of Leadership. At present, we run one program, which is called the Accelerated Management Program. It's a 6-month online management program for working professionals and with 100% live online classes. We believe it's a succinct, short program that gives you absolutely the right sort of insights to make you future ready, to make you, look for different options in your career to do better at the job you're in. And a lot of our program sits on years of experience that Pramath has had in management institutions, as well as setting up various educational institutions. It's a really a program for professionals who cannot leave their jobs and do a full-time MBA and really helps them. I have with me Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha. He is the founding dean of ISP. Pramath has also been is the chairman at present for Ashoka University and has been instrumental in setting up many higher education institutions in the country. Pramath has also worked with in consulting and across other different fields. So we are, as I said, open to all questions, and please do put your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat. It becomes easier to answer this. So Pramath, let's start right off with the topic. How does one really become a candidate everyone wants to hire? First of all, will everyone want to hire a particular candidate, or it depends on different streams and how you sort of adapt to those different streams to become a valued candidate in those jobs?
I will make it very simple, Seema. I think regardless of the fact that every job has certain specialized requirements, and regardless of what past qualifications, experiences, and so on that you have, the one thing that I think people try to gauge, or at least I always look for, I think most people always look for, is this person going to deliver results? Can this person create outcomes for me. Obviously, you're always hiring somebody for a job. You're hiring somebody to drive sales. You're hiring somebody to create content. You're hiring somebody to run operations. Whatever you are hiring people for, I often hire people for educational institutions to manage admissions. What you ultimately want to gauge is, regardless of people's background, experience, what they studied, where they studied, if you were to give them a task, will they be able to, knowing nothing at all, even if they did not know anything at all, will they be able to get the job done? And that's the key element that most employers, interviewers are trying to judge. People have different ways to do that. That's what they're trying to do. I think alongside that, there are a couple of other ingredients. If you want me to, I can expand on that now or later. But I think the ability to get stuff done, regardless of what role you're hiring for, obviously in the context of that role, but regardless of what people have done before, is what can make you most employable.
So how do you convince someone in, say, 30 minutes, someone who doesn't know you? How do you sort of show them that you are the person who can get things done?
By giving them examples and thinking through what are some of the things that you got done in your life. I remember that when I was younger and I didn't have much experience, I used to half jokingly but half seriously tell people that, listen, I organized at least half a dozen weddings because I had so many sisters in Bihar to get married. And my father, from a very young age, would give me the responsibility for organizing my sisters' weddings. And because I had done them, I would tell them that I think it's the most crucial thing to organize and to deliver by way of an end product. And I used to tell them that, you know what, the hardest part is managing the groom's family, the barat and the baratis, right? Now, it was half tongue in cheek, but I must tell you that at that time, that was the implementation experience that I had. Or I would talk very proudly about the fact that as the festival secretary of the IIT Kanpur Cultural Festival and the 25th anniversary, I was very proud in those days, and this is now 40 years ago perhaps, that I was able to raise money for the festival. And for the first time, we actually ended up in a surplus because of the fundraising that we did. And I was very proud that we got a national level singer in Pankaj Udhas and the largest number of colleges to participate. So it's not unlike what we put in our resumes, where we say, oh, achieved ABC, created a business of X crores, or reduced costs, or achieved efficiencies. People put that. And so I'm giving you examples of even non-work related examples. But then as you progress in life, being able to point to projects that you did, small or big, where you actually delivered, especially if there were ambiguous problems, somebody assigned it to you and you got it done, I think stands for a very good evidence of what you are capable of. Of course, then people will ask you, so what are the distinctive strengths? What is your style of getting things done, and so on? And one can go create a narrative around that. But being thoughtful about saying, how will I show people that if you give me an unstructured problem, if you give me any problem, even if it doesn't relate directly to my JD, I will do a good job of it and I will make sure that it gets delivered. People are looking for people like that, for talent like that.
Pramath, sometimes, these days when you are applying for a role or a job, often you are given something like in many organizations, they want you to do pre-work. And sometimes in that pre-work, you may or may not know some of the things that are sort of, being asked of you. So how does one prepare for something like that? How do you sort of, I mean, especially if you're looking to change your career, switch into a different role, you probably don't know the insights of that role. Then how do you make that, how do you go about that?
I think it's like solving a case, Seema, right? It's a case, and a lot of people will tell you that in solving a case that you're not familiar with, it's not so much about knowing the inside of that industry or domain or the case and coming up with the answer, but demonstrating your ability to think things through and showing that you can be diligent, you can be structured, you can be systematic, that you can look at things from multiple angles, and come up with something that may be the best of your capability, but it is truly the best of your capability. You're not trying to guess the answer. Excuse me. You're not jumping to a conclusion, but you are actually walking through the logic of how you might solve the problem, even if you don't have the answers. I think that's what people are looking for. I'll give you an example. When I remember being once interviewed by this person for the steel industry. Now, I was a metallurgical engineer in my undergrad, and my postgrad was, of course, a PhD in robotics, but I was actually being interviewed for the steel industry. And the person asked me, so what should a steel manufacturer do during a downturn? Right now, the world is going through a little bit of an economic downturn. Now, my common sense answer was, oh, but things are bad. You're not being able to sell steel. So you should kind of reduce production, maybe sort of look at even shutting down some production and look at waiting for things to get better over time. Now, I could see that he was not happy with the answer. And so that you also have to kind of see where you're going wrong. And this is an interview situation, but you're talking about a writing situation or a prep situation. But I then also got the sense that I needed to dig deeper. And so during that conversation and that thought process, it just struck me that maybe there's another way to look at it, and what else would I do, right? And I started to talk about, just as when you have time on your hands, you actually go back and improve things. So I was coming out as if I was suggesting that it should be cutting and slashing and burning, and I started to talk about, but there may be opportunities to improve things because you are not in a hurry to make more and more steel, and you're not in a crazy demand situation. So you have more time. So this is the time to make improvements, to fix things, and that discussion turned out to be a very important discussion. And then later on, this guy in the interview started to tell me all the other things that I could not have thought of because I didn't have the background. He started actually showing off that he knew so much about, but it completely turned my interview into a completely different interview. And it wasn't because I had any expertise. I was just trying to force myself to think, what else could I do? What else could I do? What else could I do? And I think most of us are capable of that. But I was not worried about whether I was getting the right answer or not, because I knew that I didn't know the right answer, that I wouldn't know the right answer. And there was no point in guessing.
Okay, I'm going to start taking some questions now, Pramath. This is Himanshu. He says, during an interview for a job role, if the hiring manager finds out that there are 5 people in front of him with the same level of experience in education and equipped with equally good soft skills, in that case, how does he or she hire the one candidate amongst 5? What is it amongst those 5 who are equal on every? He's also covered the ground saying they also have good soft skills. So
okay. So I would immediately say that then I would, and there were some other ingredients that I didn't cover, right? I only talked about the ability to get stuff done. And maybe these two cover that. And I hadn't covered soft skills, so he's covered that. But I think the one thing that he hasn't talked about in these 5, I think I do give a lot of weightage to people's ambition, aspiration, and evidence of drive. It's again a tough one to assess. But when people ask you questions like, what is the toughest challenge you faced? Or when people ask you questions about your background and how you overcame obstacles in your life, in your education, in your journey, that's what they're trying to assess, is your ability to be tenacious, your ability to not give up, your resilience. And this coupled with a desire to excel, to do well. So I think that's the part that I would try to assess for these 5 people. Now you can keep saying, okay, if they're equal on that also, and but I do think that this for me counts. I often do end up in situations where you find that people are very similar, or usually people will present, but because I'm much more senior today, people would always present me candidates that have been shortlisted already after many. So you end up with 2 candidates who are both, pretty capable and might both be fit for the job. And so then the question is, what are you looking for? And I'm assessing for these values of drive, ambition, tenacity, resilience. What you're really trying to do is look for people who will be self-starters, people who will be able to overcome the inevitable resistance or disruptions or challenges that they will face. So not only do you want people who can get the job done, but you also want people who can get it done independently, without having to constantly come back to you and say, oh, Pramath, I ran into this problem or that problem, or, oh my God, I can't get this done because something happened. You want people who are going to say, listen, even if I find a problem, I'll be able to take it on. Even if I have a challenge, I'll be able to take it on.
So then, when you're preparing for an interview or you're preparing for this thing, those are some of the stories, or those are some of the things about yourself that you should sort of keep ready, because we normally prepare for 3 or 4 questions, your strength, your weakness, your this thing. But when you're actually looking at a question which says your toughest achievement or your biggest challenge, at some point, these are the things that also should come out.
Yes, I think in preparation, you have to truly analyze your life, the story of your life, both the personal and the professional, and see how they feed into these 3 themes: your ability to get the work done, your ability to work well with other people, which is your soft skills, and your ability to constantly evolve and grow as a person, which is your resilience, your values. I think shaping all of your past experience, education, personal, professional journeys into feeding into those 3 questions. And so often when you're in an interview, you're trying to recognize when somebody is asking you a question, which of these 3 are they asking a question about? So when somebody says, where do you want to be in 5 years? They're not trying to test you for your problem solving. They're not trying to test you for your soft skills. They're trying to check for your ambition. When somebody says, tell me about a situation where a coworker was not delivering and you had to convince them, then they're talking about your soft skills. When somebody says, were you in a situation where your project did not go as you had hoped it would, and you were in danger of failing, what did you do? They're talking about your delivery and capability to perform. So when people ask you questions, they broadly also they don't directly fall in these buckets, but you'll have to interpret that they are asking, what are they asking that question for? Because they want to be convinced of one or more of these three dimensions.
Pramath, one of the things that I often I've always wanted to ask, and I don't think we've discussed this, when you are going in to be interviewed by a stranger, someone who doesn't know you, or maybe you don't know much about them. Oftentimes we do interview with people we don't know at all, right? We are not told in advance who is the person we are going to interview with. How do you sort of develop, what are the 2 or 3 things that you can do as a candidate to develop chemistry or to develop some level of comfort with the person who's actually going to decide whether or not you're going to get that job?
Well, one obvious one is that to the extent you can, you should stalk that person. And there's often a lot available on that person. The person may be on social media, maybe on LinkedIn. They may have written something. They may have spoken somewhere. There may be a YouTube video. There may be a blog. There may be an interview. So I think that's very important. But equally, you might be be interviewed by somebody junior who doesn't have that kind of presence. Not all of us get to interview with people who have that kind of presence. I think while one is very nervous when you go into an interview, it's important to read the interviewer in the first few questions or the first few minutes of the meeting. And typically, the way I do that is by just listening to them and just watching for the nonverbal cues, right? Is the person seeming like they're in a hurry? Are they calm? Are they frustrated? Are they carrying something over from the last interviews where they are unhappy? Are they warm or are they brusque? I think I spend a lot of time just reading people in these situations. And I guess you do that in any meeting when you're meeting somebody for the first time, but you then broadly adjust your style to make sure that you take into account their demeanor or how they might be. But an important aspect of it almost sounds like I'm being a psychologist, and I'm not. I think the pace and the rhythm of an interview is very important. Sometimes people are very low energy when they are interviewing you. I think there's an opportunity then to bring in some energy into the answers that you are giving. Equally, sometimes people are very like they're on a bullet train and they're firing away questions at you. I think slowing down the interview in your favor is a very deliberate strategy that I would take. So trying to get the interview to almost control the interview in a subtle way without getting intimidated by the other person is important in an interview. And I think the way we do that is really look at the pace of the questions, the energy in the room. And the last thing I would say is that sometimes not questioning or doubting the intent of the person. Often people put on a certain attitude. There are interviewers who like to do stress interviews. They want to badger you with questions. They want to make you feel like that they're testing you in a tough situation. I think just looking through all that and being able to say, listen, after all, this guy is sitting here, this woman is sitting here interviewing me and spending 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. They obviously want to hire you. So not feeling intimidated, but actually almost not countering a tough interviewer with with an understanding that they are just doing that because they want to test you rather than because they have something against you. They wouldn't be doing it if they wouldn't be sitting there if they didn't want to hire you. I think taking that approach also helps in that situation. So I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but all of us have different ways of gauging the person. I think it's important to gauge the person and the mood in the room and read the room before you really jump into giving answers. And so take advantage of the initial chit chat to just sense what kind of person this is and what is the tone that they're setting for the interview.
So essentially, you're saying to be the candidate that everyone wants to hire, some onus is on you, apart from all the other things that you may have, your degrees, your soft skills. Also, how you handle the person who's doing your interview becomes an important skill.
I would go so far as to say, Seema, that over a period of time, you should control the conversation.
Okay.
And it won't happen early in your career. But I used to almost start to look at interviews as an opportunity for me to shape the conversation. Regardless of the question people ask, how will I make sure that the 3-4 big things about me get woven into whatever question they ask? So, for example, I used to be everybody talks about how I've done different things in life. Now, that can be seen as a weakness or it can be seen as a plus. Now, how do you create that as a plus? So the plus for me used to be to emphasize multidisciplinarity or the diversity of experiences. And so I would make sure that I would introduce that early into the conversation. And that was a realm that I was comfortable with, right? Because I could naturally talk about the fact that I'd done this and that and why it was a strength and how I could have applied to what they wanted and so on. So you almost control the conversation in a subtle way that it goes into areas that you are most comfortable with. And then let them keep asking questions. But now you've taken them into a domain that is your domain.
Okay. So I have a question here from someone who says they have shortlisted 2 programs. One is AMP and one is another Hero Wired INSEAD-led program. Wants help to say how to choose and why. And just another sort of addition there, wants to know EMBA offered by well-known institutions like ISB, IIM, Mahindra. How are they different? How is AMP different from them? Maybe the second question first, and I don't know. How is AMP different from an EMBA offered by well-known institutions like ISB?
I think it is very different, Seema. I mean, the EMBA is an MBA. It's a master's degree offered to executives. So it's a full-time, it's a full MBA. And the only difference is that you're doing it part-time. So it's not a full-time program. You're doing it part-time. You're doing it online. Our program is not a full MBA. The MBA has a full curriculum because it's a degree, then it has to have all these elements. I feel that some people need the full MBA or want the full MBA, but a lot of people don't have the luxury of time to do a full EMBA. And the AMP is an alternative to that. So what we've done is we've done away with all the things that go into an MBA, which I think are extras. You don't really need them to function in a profession of management. There's a lot of value addition that happens in an MBA, which you may or may not use. It's like saying that, to really do math or to do the kind of math you do in business, you don't really need calculus. But if you did a math degree, or if you studied math in class 10 and 12, we teach calculus. Now, you never use calculus for the rest of your life. So what I've done is in the AMP program, I've removed things like calculus because you never need it, you never use it, and reduced it to the bare minimum on the management side, number one. Number two, what we've done is we brought in a lot of new things which are relevant today, like product management, data science, digital marketing, which traditional MBA programs are not able to bring in the changes in curriculum fast enough. So that's very practical. It's here and now. You need it today. In addition to that, there's a heavy dose of leadership skills and practical skills that we bring in, which is the Harappa part of it. So that's the distinctiveness of Harappa, and our belief that it's not just technical skills that make you successful. It's these skills beyond the technical domain, like leadership skills, like cognitive skills, behavioral skills, thinking skills, problem solving skills, communication skills. That track is very intense and a significant part of the AMBA program, which you typically won't find in a MBA program. And it's partly because our program is also very practitioner led. So we bring in a lot of people who are actually working professionals who tell you how the academic frameworks and concepts apply in the real world. So that's how AMP is different from an EMBA or an MBA. As far as the specific INSEAD Wired program is concerned, I actually don't know about the program, so I wouldn't be able to guide you. And maybe we can have a separate conversation once I know what it is about, or one of our counselors can guide you. If it's an MBA inspired by INSEAD, then I suspect that the same thing that I said earlier will hold true. If it's a smaller certificate course, then I don't know if it covers all the aspects of AMP. And of course, if it's similar, then the choice you have to make is in a brand name like INSEAD, for which I'm sure you'll pay the big bucks. And what we have, which is, I think, would be far more affordable. I don't know what it is priced at.
All right, let's move on, Pramath. I have lots and lots of questions which have come in. I have a question from Abhilash Anand. He says, I experience that today people are much more eager to grow, but not always ready to learn. And I suspect this is not really much to do with our topic, but he wants to know how to convert the eagerness within a team, within a team member, to growth of the member and the organization. I think this is basically saying, how do you sort of, people want to grow, but how do you sort of also tell them that it's about learning, and then it sort of gets linked to how you grow within an organization. And
well, you can tell people that, but those types of people will normally not understand. I would give them a big challenge. If people say, I want to grow, say, fine. If growth in their case means I want a bigger job, I want a bigger designation, I want more salary, you say, sure, fine. Why don't you take on this challenge, go do it and show it to me? And then they will realize that it's not just about growing, it's actually about learning, because then they will realize that they are being challenged. They don't know how to do it, and they have to really go back to the basics and learn. So usually when I have people like that who are very entitled or demanding, one is to talk them down, but they may not be satisfied because they probably still think they are the cat's whiskers and they deserve to have a bigger opportunity. And I don't know if that's what you meant by people who want growth. I would then, because growth and learning are the same thing in my book, but if you are saying that they are two different things, I presume that the people who want to grow are just looking to grow in terms of compensation or position. I would throw them a bone and say, fine, you prove it. Prove to me that you can. And they will know very quickly, if you've given them a tough enough challenge, that the only way they can succeed is by learning.
Okay. Pramath, I have another very interesting conversation that started here, where somebody wants to know, this is, just give me a second. This is Subrata Panda, says, at the CXO, which is basically CIO, CEO, CTO, basically the C-suite level, what is it that interviewers generally look for? And more in an IT atmosphere, but I would say leadership, but I'm sure you can sort of answer that better.
Yeah, I think to be more specific, Seema, of course, I think people look for CXOs who transcend their domain. So even if you are going to be a CIO or a CTO, are you going to be able to be, for me, a person who is a business partner, truly? The problem with a lot of CXOs who come from the domain is that they are still not able to go beyond the domain. So if I say this is my strategic priority as a company, I want you as a CXO to contribute as much to that strategic priority as a C-suite person rather than a CIO or a CTO or a CFO. I want you to use all your experience, your brains, your expertise to be a thought partner to me in that journey. Of course, on the CIO part and on the IT part and the CFO part. And I think that's again what we are trying to do at the AMP, not to bring everything back to the AMP, but the philosophy behind the AMP is exactly that. Is that, are you a T-shaped person? Some of you may have heard this expression, where the idea to describe somebody's profile is to say that you have a T-shaped profile. So the bottom part of the trunk of the T shape is really your depth of expertise. So that's your technology, IT, finance, marketing, HR expertise. But the top of the T is your breadth. That you can actually, even as an IT person, you have the ability to give the marketing person inputs about how they should be thinking about marketing our product. You can give the salesperson some ideas on what the qualities are of what we have to offer that will differentiate us from other people in the market. Now, that may be drawing on your technology or IT experience, but it goes beyond that. You're able to ask intelligent questions of your colleagues without seeming like you are randomly questioning them. That adds value to what they do, whether it's the finance person or the HR person or the marketing person or the salesperson or indeed the CEO. The fact that you are keeping the factory running by managing IT is par for the course. It's what is expected. What is really expected is that can you add value beyond that? That's what people are looking for when they interview people at that level. And that's the importance of saying, yes, I have expertise in a certain area, but I can actually span all domains.
And I think that's something that an AMP does, right? It basically gives you that.
Yes, we bring that mindset in at a relatively junior level, because people who are joining us in the AMP are not really CXOs.
Correct.
But I think by the time they become CXOs, I think they will be much better equipped than the normal CXO.
All right. I have a question here from Ayush. He says, how can I share my journey of overcoming challenges to reach where I am today without it coming across as just a sob story? For example, graduating is a regular thing with my background, but rather than framing it as it was harder for me to be there, basically whatever challenge he or she faced to sort of get where, doesn't want it to sound like a sob story.
I think as long as you're authentic, don't think of it as a sob story. That's in your head. For example, I don't think I come from a sob story background, but I can tell you that I did have a big challenge when I went to study in the US. In my first semester, I didn't have a scholarship. And my parents could not afford to fund the full extent of my education. So even though in India I was very comfortable, the moment I went to Philadelphia and to the University of Pennsylvania, I had to have 4 jobs. Now, I'm very proud of the fact that I had 4 jobs and that I not only held 4 jobs, I earned that money which paid for my living expenses. Then I got I did get a perfect grade point average in that semester. So it's not a sob story. It's just something to say that, hey, I'm proud of this. I'm proud of it because I had a challenge and I overcame it. Now, if people are going to take it as a sob story, I think that's their problem. As long as you went through an authentic experience and you're able to outline it as an authentic experience and you're able to talk about the fact that you're proud of your achievement without making too much of it or making it sound like a sob story. So I would not be humble about your achievements at all. I mean, I would be humble, but I would not be shy to share. Let other people interpret it. As long as you're authentic about it, As long as you are true, as long as you're not making things up, as long as you're not making it sound more than it is, I think people will appreciate the frankness and the openness of what you have to share. At least I have found that. And again, I'm telling you, I don't think I have any reason to say that I have any sob stories, because I think I've had a privileged background. But then how do I introduce the fact that I did still face challenges? And that's the corollary to the question you're asking, right? So if somebody doesn't have sob stories, do they not have challenges? Everybody has challenges. So I think the point is to focus on a genuine challenge in your context, in your circumstance that you face, and playing it back.
Okay, I have an interesting question from Mahesh, and I think this is one of the things I personally believe are very important for you to become the right candidate. He says, in the current economy, before the interview, there have been many circumstances of casual conversations to explore interest and potential. What is your advice for presenting your best self in this pre-interview stage so that you can get into the official interview process?
I think there are no casual conversations when you're hiring somebody. So Mahesh, if you are the Mahesh I know, I should tell you that my experience is that people are constantly evaluating you. And even if it's an informal conversation, it may be an informal conversation. People may not present a case study to you, right? People may not give you a problem to solve, or really not test you. That's the difference between. But even in the informal conversation, in fact, in the informal conversation, they are probably testing you even more, because they're saying, oh, this is what this guy will be like to talk to, or this is how he will be with a client or a colleague in a normal setting. So I would firstly not think of it as a casual conversation, and I would put my best self forward. I wouldn't overdo it. I wouldn't make it extra formal if it is informal. But I would still put my best foot forward, Mahesh. I wouldn't take any chances. You please assume that you are being constantly evaluated. Even when you have a phone conversation to set up an interview or to make an inquiry or to change something or to ask for a clarification, you're being constantly evaluated. Because at the back end, the people, the person's assistant who you spoke to, or the HR person you are interacting with, are all forming views about you, and it's informally getting communicated. Yeah, this guy seems really nice, or this guy is being a jerk, or all of that kind of feeds back into the system. So just assume that you are being constantly evaluated, formal, informal, main interviewer, some other flunky in the organization. Take no chances.
Okay, I have a question from Abhi Gupta. How does one go about self-evaluating one's profile and upskilling when you're told you're not fit for a role?
Tough one. I mean, I need more context. But if somebody told me I was not fit for a role, I would ask them lots of questions about why. What is the reason that they are not? And if they are giving you all the reasons, then I would try and verify those reasons by talking to other people who have exposure to you to convince. Because basically somebody is giving you feedback. They're saying this is your strength, this is your weakness, or these are things you do well, these are the things you don't do well. If you agree with some of those things, then there's no problem. But I'm assuming that you will disagree with some of those things, and then you have to kind of verify whether those things that you disagree on are very true or not. So you talk to other people who have exposure to you. If you don't have that, if you don't have people to verify or give you a second opinion, as it were, and you still don't agree, then don't take it as a given. Test it out in the next opportunity that you take up. And ask people who you work with next for feedback. If they confirm that, yes, you continue to demonstrate, if they are telling you things that you heard before, then you do have a problem that you need to fix. Otherwise, it was a one-off and you can move on. So ultimately, the best judge of who you are is partly by reflection, but partly also a large part of it is uh, by getting feedback from others who have true exposure, not just people who have kind of observed you from far away or just giving an opinion, but people who have genuinely worked with.
This is an interesting question, and I think very, very relevant in today's day and time. Though it has two different sort of parts. This is Aditya wants to know how to handle the difficult question of being fired from a job because of performance or due to company mass layoff. I think these are two different things. And he wants to know, should you be honest and tell the truth or do sugarcoating?
So when you are firing somebody,
no, it says what if in an interview you have to answer maybe a gap, and your gap is because either you have been fired because of performance or because the company did mass layoffs. So how do you answer this? I'm presuming you'll have a different answer for both, right? Because performance.
Yeah, so I think if it was a layoff, you should say it was a layoff, and I don't think that there's any shame in that. People understand that. Though there will be an implied performance thing also, because there'll be why were you laid off versus somebody else being laid off, and obviously the implication will be that you were laid off because you were not needed, right? Listen, I personally always feel is that you don't have to hurt yourself by say that you're fired for performance, right? I would normally put it, and maybe there is some sugarcoating here, but not a full amount of sugarcoating, that listen, there was a mismatch in expectations, and that there seemed to be a gap between what the organization was looking for and what you thought you were able to deliver and what you were capable of. And I would leave it at that. I would not get into the mechanics of whether you were summoned one day and told you're fired or you didn't perform well at all. And then people might ask you, well, what was the mismatch? What was it that you were expected to do and that you couldn't do? And I think you need to answer that very frankly, that, I was asked to get a target of 100 and I was only able to achieve 60. There were reasons why that didn't happen. And I agree that I was not able to deliver it, though there were many circumstances. I also felt that that was not the place for me. Maybe I took up that job thinking I was going to be able to deliver, and I wasn't. But I think that was that context. I think that I still have good qualities and skills that I can do for you. So I think I would be a little bit matter of fact about it. I wouldn't go so far as to say, oh yeah, I was fired. I would say that there was a mismatch in expectations and we chose to part ways. And things didn't turn out the way I had hoped. I'm sure the employers would say the same thing about me. But we all have blips like this in our career, and this was one of those blips that I've learned a lot from that experience. I think mentioning that is also important, to be able to say that, yes, there was a failure. It's not important what failed and how it failed, but I've learned a lot from that experience about myself and what I can do better going forward. I think that is a good way to end the answer to that question. It gives people the impression that you're being mature and wise, and you see it as a growth and not as a negative.
Okay, we have a question here from Giridhar Patel. Says he has an MBA from a Mumbai university, which is not a very well-known institution, and has a good job, with a well-known brand, and has 10 years of experience in sales and key account management. Wants to know, can AMP help him pivot into a leadership role? And what are the chances that he can also aim for an opportunity abroad?
Yeah, I think the whole point about AMP is to help you get into a more broader role, just beyond the functional and the domain role that you are functioning in. I cannot give you any. I don't think this has anything to do with going abroad or not. That way, no degree can get you that. So I don't think that is relevant here. Whether you go abroad or not is a whole different set of issues. No MBA, no program will position you for a degree, for a position abroad. Yes, I think what it does is that it allows you to move into a much broader, and it's not necessarily, I don't know what you mean by leadership role. I'm sure you are playing, everybody is a leader. I'm sure you're leading something right now. But yes, Do you think you want a broader leadership, a broader general leadership role in an organization? Yes, the AMP is built for that. Will that happen immediately? Maybe not. It'll put you on a path to that. That's what we are saying it does, because it broadens you up from being in a narrow area to a broader area. That's the point. And yes, the answer to the first question is yes, broadly. And the answer to the second part of your question is not possible to predict that.
I have a question here from DR. Says, I think it's a she. She says she has 12 years of experience. Being a woman, what should I do differently to become a leader in the near future? What barriers should I be aware of, and how should I break the glass ceiling?
Well, there are many aspects to that. If I had to give you one silver bullet answer, I will tell you the biggest thing that women lack is not capability, but confidence. I think you have to start believing that you are as good as anyone else, and that you, more than anyone else, have the capabilities, the confidence, the ability to succeed and do well in life. That's number one. Don't let anybody tell you that you are any less. And more importantly, don't let yourself tell you that you are any less. I think somewhere women feel an imposter syndrome, they lack confidence, they second guess themselves, and so on. The second thing I would say is that if there's a second thing I would say speak up more, talk more, don't be hesitant to, it's connected to the first point, but don't be hesitant to express yourself. Understand that there is always some conflict at the workplace. Get comfortable with that. Good conflict is good conflict. Bad conflict is bad conflict. All conflict is not bad conflict. So women tend to hold back because they are afraid of conflict. They are afraid to assert themselves because they feel that they might be taken the wrong way. Try to speak up. Don't second guess yourself in expressing yourself. And I think those are the two things I would do. I'm sure you have all the capabilities, the inherent potential that anybody else has, and you'll do well if you just focus on those two things.
I have a question here from someone who says the AMP program is online. How can you apply the different leadership, data, marketing skills that you learn in the programs in a hands-on manner?
Well, you can apply it between lectures at the workplace the very next day and come back to class and say, I tried it out and it worked or it didn't work, and ask faculty for feedback. So it's as hands-on as it gets. That's the advantage of doing these online executive programs. Right, Seema? I mean, you know this from the classes that we do.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll see the results almost immediately, and you'll be able to you have constant feedback because you're on the job. You've not left your job to become a full-time student, and you will not go back after 1 year to see what you learned. Is it really applicable?
Yes, and because we have practitioners and we have simulation sessions, you do get the more practical aspects of it.
Also, the diversity of your class, because people come from so many different backgrounds. You work with them in groups, you do all of this, you work on projects, so you learn so much from the people within your cohort that you're able to immediately see what you're learning and what works and what doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, the group sessions, even during the live classes, helps.
I have a question here from Jay Gaurav. Says he has 15 years of experience and has been in a manager role for the past few years, is not able to get promoted to a senior level or get interview calls for senior level roles. How should I show that I'm ready for the next step in my life?
I don't know. I think in the organization itself, you should talk to people who take calls on promotions and ask them why you're not getting promoted, what might be getting in the way, and understand. They may be able to tell you what they feel is missing or what they would like to see. And then you should then ask for them to give you a chance to demonstrate those capabilities. As far as moving into other roles in other firms is concerned, I think you should look at maybe smaller firms where you can be a bigger frog in a smaller pond, as they say. Maybe you'll have to move to a smaller firm to get a bigger role so that you can break this cycle of being stuck somewhere. The last thing is programs like AMP, MBA, and these things where you actually move out and reskill and upskill yourself and then use that as a break, as something to break this sort of cycle, or let the where you're getting stuck, and try to use that to propel yourself up. So those are some of the ways in which I would look at moving out.
We have Reshma, who says, resigned from a job, wants to now get back almost after a year gap. Career gaps seem to be a negative thing in a CV. How can you present those career gaps in a positive way in an interview?
I mean, I think you really have to think about 2-3 things. One was, why did you take the gap? Was it for a personal challenge you were facing, which you wanted to devote your time to, for family or health issues, or just to take time off to do something that you were passionate about? So I think putting it in a positive light, usually we do have a positive reason for why we take a gap. And I think being authentic about that and not being afraid of how that will be judged, I think is important. Second, what did you do in that period and what did you learn, even if you didn't work? Have you learned something new about yourself? Have you realized something? What changed by virtue of taking that time off? Even if you took time off to, say, look after a relative who was unwell or take care of your child, what did you learn? How has that changed you? I think is another way. And therefore, what will that result in the new Reshma going forward? And what will you be able to bring to your workplace as a result of that 1 year off? Those are 3 ways in which you can actually position it as a positive.
Okay, here is a question from someone who wants to know, what is a way to build a captivating narrative about your professional journey? Something that can eventually be tailored for various roles.
You want to take a crack at that while I take a quick break and come back?
Sure. So essentially, we would say that there are certain clear sort of questions that every interviewer will ask you. It could be about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, tell us in short, what is your life story. We found that people often end up just sort of, just talking what's already there on your resume. By the time you reach your interview, it's important to have a sort of narrative, which is, while it covers what's in your resume, it also gives that little extra that you are not able to put in your resume. We would say one of the ways to have a narrative is to practice. Put your points down, have some mock interviews with people who may know you, may not know you. And I think it's a constant, upgradation. You can't just start preparing before an interview. You'll realize that oftentimes you will miss out on things. A very interesting sort of tip that a couple of people from our cohorts have mentioned is that if they, every month they write a little journal where they sort of put down things that have done very well in that month at their job, or things that have not gone so well. So what happens is you have like a little memory book that, then later on when you're preparing for your next role, next job, you have something to pull out from there and sort of talk, because immediately it's very difficult to remember those things. I think another way that you could look at it is some of the, strength, weakness questions, etc. You should never sort of, the person on the other side is also has experience, right? So disguising a strength as a weakness is not the option, it's not an answer. So those are things that you need to sort of prepare for well in advance, rather than, wait for the last minute. Anything you want to add, Pramath?
No, I think those are all great things. I think one, preparation is very important. Going beyond the resume is very important. Not having just a chronological description of who you are. Picking out 2 or 3 things that you really want to highlight and be consistently hammering away in all conversations, interviews, emails. I think those are some of the things that Seema also talked about. And then practice. Practice makes perfect, as they say, but practicing as many times to be able to tell the story about yourself.
Okay, Pramath, very quickly, last two questions. How likely are we to get a co-branded certification for AMP with ISB? I don't think that's on the cards at all.
No, I don't think we should confuse what I'm doing with ISB or Ashoka or any of those things. I think those are separate institutions. We are exploring possibilities of doing stuff with institutions, and in that sense, maybe in the future, with many institutions, we may be doing stuff. But right now, we are really focused on doing our own thing.
And I have a question here with someone who's working as a relationship manager at a public sector bank. Promotions are based on seniority. We are paid here per scale, not as per skill. Can AMP help me in my career as in a public sector bank?
I don't know. I don't think so. Neither will any degree or MBA, but for that matter, in a public sector setting. This is an investment that you're making in yourself for the future. And so a lot of things one does in life is for oneself. Unfortunately, my impression is that in a public sector bank, none of any upskilling of any sort doesn't matter. You'll be in a lockstep kind of situation.
And one last question, Pramath. This is from Tribhuvan. He says, can AMP help people in a career switch? I may have experience in a certain functional area with generic and leadership skills, but I'm tired of doing the same kind of work. Can AMP help me to move out and do something else?
Absolutely. I think that you've answered your own question is what I would say. That is exactly why we built AMP.
Okay.
And you should certainly consider it, and we can have a longer conversation about how it actually does that.
Okay. I know there was an AI question.
We can quickly take these open questions. I have a few minutes and people have to drop off. Thank you very much for joining us. Nripendra talks about the sister's marriage. I'm glad that you found something common there. Advent of AI. How do you clear the AI algorithm logic to be invited for interviews? I don't understand that.
This is the ATS system, Pramath, and we've talked about this in our previous webinar with Kanika and with other people. Essentially, this is how do you put what is in the job description? You keep putting it in your resume because the system tracks for that. Happy to connect with you separately, Sharath, and please reach out. We'll be happy to answer these questions.
Yeah, skipped level 2 interview. I didn't get that either. Is that skipped?
I think that's normally when you don't go to the direct hiring manager, but the person above. So what is the intention of that? Normally, I think that's more.
Yeah, I think people have more experience. They are able to judge potential because ultimately you're betting on somebody's potential, right? Does it apply the right place at the right time? Of course, it applies to the real life, but sometimes you have to create the right time for yourself. You can't sit on your chair and say right time will happen when it happens. So yes, that's the Kumar Shantanu's question. Difference clearly that I can find one difference that no EMBA.
Yes, we do provide a placement assistance.
We do provide placement assistance. We are very clear that we are providing you placement assistance, and we provide you placement assistance to the extent that you can till you actually get a position. Build an institution, patient capital. Oh wow, you just have to go to rich people and shame them into giving you money. That's how you find patient. Donate money to you. It's only philanthropy. Help me get recognition in the Europe market? Probably not in the way it is right now. Yeah, so I think we've answered those questions. Were there any questions in the chat?
We've taken everything from
Okay, thank you so much, Seema. This was a good discussion, quick and crisp. We are at 12 o'clock and it's Sunday, so we should let people go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we are putting in the details. If anyone wants to know more about the AMP program, please do reach out to our team. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.